So let's learn about the grammar and meaning of our new atomic formulas, and then we'll learn about the quantifiers and how they work in much more detail later. So the first thing is we're going to have a whole bunch of new symbols. You've already seen most of them, but let's list them out. So there's going to be a new category, a kind of symbol. So the first new category is going to be names. And what are names? They're going to be little a through little h. And what would be an equivalent? Like my name, like Luca, or your name, whatever your name is, John, Juan, Alice, Alicia, whatever the name is, that could be symbolized by little a through little h. Second new category is variables. Variables are going to be little I through little z. How do these work? So they're like variables in mathematics. We say x, x plus y equals 10 or whatever. In that equation, x and y are working as variables like that. Or if I say every dog loves its master, the it there is hooked up with the every dog, and that's another way that variables can work. So some variables in mathematics and some uses of pronouns in English. We call this category from little a through little z overall terms. Names and variables go in the same place grammatically. They both do the same kind of thing. They're both pointing at objects. A name has a fixed interpretation, so Luca refers to me, whereas variables can change what they're referring to in ways that names don't, but they go in the same place grammatically, as we will see. Another new category is predicates, and this is big A through big O. What are examples of predicates? Verbs and verb phrases. So things like runs, or is running, or is a runner, is green, is a frog, all of those. The verb runs, or a verb phrase like is running, the verb is hooked up with running, or is red, so that's a unit made up of is plus red, we call verb phrase. So things like that. So notice we've just used up all of the alphabet now. Previously we had big P through big Z. Now we have big A through big O, which is the new predicates, and then our terms little a through little z. So we've got the whole alphabet. And then we have our quantifiers, and those are, and there are going to be two of them. There's what we call the existential quantifier. It's the backwards E for exists, and it means something is such that, or at least one thing is such that, at least one. The other is the universal quantifier. It's the upside down A, and that's for basically all. And it means each thing is such that, or all things are such that. So you ideally will write these down in your notes, because that's the best way you're going to remember them. If you don't do that, you'd want to have this slide in particular either separated out in your notes somewhere on your computer, or print out the slide. But ideally, you want to write this down so that you learn all these new grammatical categories. And just remember, existential E, exists, backwards E, universal all, upside down A. So if you see backwards E, you think exists. If you see upside down A, you think all. Okay, so those are the new building blocks. How do we build sentences with them? Well, actually, we're going to talk about things called formulas instead of sentences for reasons that we're not going to learn about right now. So we have 2.5 new grammatical rules. We have, if you have a predicate letter, so big A through big O, you can, if you have that and then you put a name or a variable, so any little letter, then you have a formula, like a sentence. Or if you have a formula, you can take either quantifier and a variable, so little I through little z, and put them all in a row. So you have the quantifier symbol, a variable, little I through little z, and then your old formula. So our grammatical rules overall, we have 2 kinds of atomic formulas now. We have every sentence letter as a formula, so big P through big Z. Those don't have any parts at all. And then we have the predicate letter, big A through big O, followed by term, little a through little z, is also a formula. It's got parts, but those are like the parts of an atom. They aren't other atoms, and they aren't formulas in particular. Okay, and then we have the rule that says if you have a formula, there are now 3 things you can put on front of it. You can put a negation on the front of it, but you can also put a quantifier and a variable on the front of it and make a new formula. And then we have all of our old rules for if, then, and, if and only if, and, or. So in English, the way 3, 2, 1. All natural languages, in other words, languages that you can learn as a child just by exposure to them, have their own grammar, and there are different grammar patterns in those different languages. And one fundamental issue and way they can differ is what's the order of the subject, the verb, and the object. So English is subject, verb, object. So we have first the cat, then we have sat, the verb, and then we have on the mat, the object. So subject and then verb and then object. Most natural languages are SVO like English, or they might be subject, object, verb. So that would be the cat on the mat, sat. The subject comes first, the cat, then the object on the mat, and then sat. Some put the verb first. So while you may be used to subject, verb, object, they could come in any, well, maybe not any order, but lots of different orders in natural languages. And, well, how does it work in the logical language? Well, let's look at some examples and then we'll generalize. So let's suppose that F, so F, remember, is a predicate letter, so it symbolizes things like verbs and verb phrases. F might mean runs. What kind of thing is A? A is a name, so A might symbolize something like Bob. So then FA would symbolize the English sentence, Bob runs. Or maybe F means is green, and A means Jane, another name. And so then what would FA mean? It would mean Jane is green. Or if F meant is a frog, another bigger verb phrase, and A meant Rex, another name, then we would say Rex is a frog. Okay? So in our logical language, the atomic form, the grammar order is verb subject. So if we had Bob as a cat in English, so Bob would be the subject, and that's a name, so that would be symbolized by a little b. And then we have is a cat, that's the verb phrase, that turns into the predicate big C. So Bob, the name, turns into little b, is a cat, turns into big C, and then we have the order in our logical language of verb subject, so we put big C and then little b. And there are mathematical reasons why it has been done this way. It's slightly confusing, that's why I'm talking about it. So what you need to remember is that the grammatical order in the logical language for the atomic formulas, these new ones made up of a predicate letter and a name, it's the reverse of the way it is in English. English goes subject, verb, object, and in particular, for what matters for us, it goes subject, verb. In the logical language, it goes verb, subject. So you see the atomic formula in the logical language, and you think, it goes the other way than it does in English. Okay. Let's do some grammatical exercises here. So let's see, would FA be an atomic formula? Well, the rule says you have to have a predicate letter followed by a term, and a term is either a name or a variable. So is FA a predicate? Yes. Big A through big O are predicate letters, and is little a term? Yes, it's a name. So we have a predicate letter followed by a name, and so yes, that's grammatical. What about big G, little I? Well, is big G a predicate? Yes, it's a big letter between A and O. What about I? Well, the names are A through H, so I is not a name. But all the other little letters from I to Z are variables, and those count as terms as well. Variables go in the same place as names, so we have a predicate letter followed by a variable. Yes, that counts. How about H? Whoops. Well, there we go. HE. So H is a predicate letter. E is a name, so we have a predicate letter followed by a name, and in particular, and so a predicate letter followed by a term, so that counts. What about little a, big F? Well, little a is a name, and big F is between big A and big O, so big F is a predicate letter. So there we have a name followed by a predicate letter. That's the wrong order for our logical language, and so that doesn't count. In our logical language, you have to have a predicate letter and then a name. This is the way in English you would write. In English, right, it's subject, verb, so you have name, verb, but it's reversed in the logical language, and so this is the wrong order in the logical language. How about big P, little z? Well, little z is a variable, and it's in the right place, so that's good. But is big P a predicate letter? No, predicate letters are big A through big O. P is a sentence letter, and we cannot take a sentence letter and then a variable and make one of these new formulas, so that doesn't count. That's not grammatical either. How about big F through big N? Well, big F is a predicate letter, and big N is a predicate letter, so that's predicate letter, predicate letter. So that's not predicate followed by a term, and so that doesn't count either. How about F negation X? You might want to be able to say, how are negations going to work? Well, the way negations haven't changed how they work. they work in the same way. And how does a negation work? It goes on the front of a formula, and that's the only place it goes. It doesn't go on variables, so that doesn't count either. So none of those would be examples of those last ones of our new grammatical rule for forming atomic formulas. So hopefully that's helped you to see how that grammatical rule works. We still need to learn how to interpret these formulas. We'll do that in a subsequent video, but the next thing we need to do is do some parsing in the module with formulas like this or things that look like this but aren't formulas, because the parsing module has changed just a little bit. So we'll do that in the next video.